No one likes to think they are capable of doing evil. We all picture ourselves as the exception, the one who would refuse the order, the one who would walk away. But what if cruelty was not about your personality at all? What if it was just a switch in your head and all it took to flip it would be a person with authority? Today we're diving into one of the most disturbing studies ever run, the Milgram Obedience Experiment. The research that terrified the world by showing how easily ordinary people could become executioners. But we'll go deeper than the headlines. We'll look at the setup, at the results, uncover the hidden flaws that prove that this was about persuasion as much as obedience, and most importantly, I'll show you the tools you need to resist the trap and say no, even when authority is breathing down your neck. In the early 1960s, psychologist Stanley Milgram wanted to answer the question that haunted the 20th century. Were the horrors of the Holocaust carried out by sadists or by ordinary people just following orders? Volunteers were recruited for what they thought was a memory and learning study. When they arrived at Yale University, they met two other people. One would be the experimenter, a serious person in a lab coat. The second person would be the learner, which was another volunteer but secretly was an actor. The draw was rigged so the real volunteer will always be the teacher. The teacher sat in front of a shock machine with 30 switches starting at 15 volts, which is slight shock, all the way up to 450 volts, danger, severe shock. The teacher would ask a question to the learner, so every time the learner got the question wrong on a word pair task, the teacher was told to deliver a shock, climbing higher and higher each time. The shocks were not real, but the cries of pain were. Pre-recorded audio escalated with each level, with each shock. At 75 volts, there will be grounds of discomfort. At 150 volts, there will be desperate shouting, "Let me out, I have a heart condition." At 300 volts, furious banging on the wall, then chilling silence. The teacher sweated, trembled, laughed nervously, and even begged to stop. But whenever they hesitated, the experimenter calmly used one of these 4 scripted prods. Please continue. The experiment requires that you continue. It is absolutely essential that you continue. You have no other choice. You must go on. Before the experiment, experts predicted that maybe 1% of people will go all the way up to 450 volts. But in reality, 65% of the participants, of the teachers, delivered the maximum 450 volts shock. Every single person questioned it, but 2/3 obeyed. Milgram conclusion shook the world. Ordinary people will betray their conscience under pressure from authority. This isn't just about history or some kind of an experiment. Think about an office where the boss says, just play up with the numbers a little bit. It's wrong, but he's calm, he's confident, and he's in charge. And most people would go along, not because they are bad people, but because the pressure feels the same as in this experiment. For decades, this study was taught as proof that people blindly obey to authority, but new analysis shows a deeper, darker truth. Archive recordings show the experimenter often went beyond the official 4 prods. Here is an interesting thing. When he used the harshest command, "You have no choice, you must continue," most people actually refused. The highest obedience came from the softer lines like, "The experiment requires that you continue." So we can say that people were not blindly obeying, but they were persuaded to believe they were helping science. This is how corporate fraud happens. Employees are not told, "Oh, you go and break the law." They are told, "This is for the good of the company," or "This is how it's done." The appeal to duty makes them silence their own conscience. In another variations of this Milgram obedience study, if the teacher knew the learner personally, a friend or a family member, then the disobedience jumped to 85%. That's why whistleblowers in medicine or the military often speak out when they see real harm to real people. A nurse might ignore bad policy until they see an actual patient's life at risk. Then empathy would be greater than the obedience. Here's what most people miss. The real danger is not obedience. It's how easily authority can reframe cruelty as a noble act. Most teachers, they were not shocking because they enjoyed it. They thought they were helping science, they were contributing to knowledge, and they were doing their duty. And that's exactly how atrocities happen, when systems convince ordinary people that harm is actually service. Think about history. Soldiers told they are protecting their nation when they're ordered to commit atrocities. Employees, they are told that they are serving the customer when they are pressured into harmful sales tactics. The framing is what makes cruelty feel righteous. How do you resist when authority pushes you to cross a moral line? Look for the warning signs. Number one would be moral blinders. Authority says, don't think about it, just focus on the procedure. Number two, appeals to duty. Phrases like, it's essential you continue, or the system requires this and that. And third, isolation. If you don't see the victim, don't know their name, that's how empathy gets swiped away. What can you do instead? Ask questions. Don't just refuse silently. Demand details. What happens if this harms him? What's the purpose of this procedure? That forces authority to justify itself, breaking the spell. The people who disobeyed in the study, they were not heroes. They just said out loud, I don't want to hurt him. Speaking it out makes your conscience harder to silence. And always remind yourself of the human being nature. Use their names. Picture them as your family. That's the antidote to blind obedience. And lastly, find allies. Obedience is strongest when you feel alone. Even another person who disagrees massively lowers compliance. That's why movements against injustice always start with a handful of people willing to say no. Look at big scandals, financial fraud, medical cover-ups, political corruption. Every story has the same pattern. Hundreds obeyed, a few resisted. And almost always it started with someone asking questions, speaking their doubts, and finding allies. The Milgram experiments are remembered as proof that obedience is irresistible. But the deeper truth is scarier and also more hopeful. Authority can make cruelty feel righteous, but empathy, connection, and the courage to speak out are enough to break the spell. At the end of the day, authority can pressure you, persuade you, even bully you, but it cannot absolve you of responsibility. The switch is still in your hand. If this video changed the way you see authority, hit subscribe to The Dark Mirror. I'll see you next time.